So when I got the invitation to present here, I was super excited. For one, I was going to be with all my residential folks, right? This is a special place that we have in the industry. The other reason I was really pumped and stoked about this opportunity is I get to talk about my business. And if you know me, it's one of my passions in life. And so any chance I get to talk about my business, I'm super, super excited about. Now, I got the invitation to present, and then a few weeks later, I found out what the topic was, what the theme was, right? We've heard a lot about habits and consistency. That is the theme. And the truth is that these are the two things in life I have struggled with the most, habits and consistency. Now, I didn't tell the committee that this was my struggle in life, so I figured if I at least got up on stage, had my presentation ready to go, they weren't going to pull me off stage. But the truth is, like many of you that we've heard from today, this is a struggle. Now, I told you how much I love my business, and what has happened is my business and the love for it and the passion that I have for it has forced me to address these two things, habits and consistency. And what I've kind of done through a lot of deep soul searching, that includes therapy and coaching and all of those things, which I'm going to get into, what I have identified is that my actual pain point, my inadequacies as it relates to habits and consistency, always fell back on the idea that I struggled with keeping promises to myself. So that's my thing. What I have done is I have reframed habits and consistency. I have narrowed it down to this issue for me of keeping promises, right? How I show up in life, more importantly, how I show up for myself. And so I want to give you this visual, and this is what I kind of think about in life, and this is what I think about as a business owner as I'm on this, this path that is super difficult. Some of you have already highlighted those difficulties, but I believe I have this edge in life, okay? And I want you to try to visualize this. What I'm doing is I'm trying to get as close to this edge as humanly possible, okay? And this edge, what I believe on the other side of this edge is all the joy, all the connection, all the happiness, and all the success that I am truly looking to find for myself, right? And for my business. Now, what that requires me to do is to really get uncomfortable at times. And I'm going to let you guys in on a secret. It's on my next slide, but one of the things that is most uncomfortable for me, in the world. I'm an introvert through and through. This guy's smiling because he's heard this before. One of the things that is most uncomfortable for me is to stand on a stage in front of 100 people and give a presentation. And so what I want you to think about as you hear my voice maybe shaking a little bit is that right now in front of you, I am actually pushing myself to my edge, okay? So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this. Now, I kind of talked about this is my worst nightmare right now, right? It's doing this in front of you all. But the truth is I grew up with extreme social anxiety as a child, and still on some level I have that now as an adult. But my business and my love for my business is really forcing me outside of that box. Now, anybody else in here struggle with social anxiety? Right, it's a real thing, right? But this is part of my edge in life. And I want to tell you a quick story, and I'm actually going to tell you a series of stories throughout this presentation. But when I was young, and if you remember, you're in class, and the teacher goes around and wants everyone to read, right? You have to read a paragraph, read a few sentences. That was literally torture for me. I would do whatever I could to get out of that classroom. How about speech class in college? Gosh, why do they have speech class, right? Terrible idea for introverts. This is how awful my social anxiety was. My first college speech class, I get into my professor's office before class, and I go in there and I tell my professor, there is absolutely no way I can do this presentation today. And he's worried. He's like, well, why? What's wrong? And I said, this is embarrassing. I said, my grandma died. I'm so sorry, Granny. Now listen, I've apologized to my granny over and over for this, but I just lied. That was my way to get out of it. And I'm just illustrating how awful this was for me, right? But that is my thing, the social anxiety. And as I tell you a few more stories, that's ultimately going to show you what has shaped my business. And we just had someone talk about, values and culture in a business. And the experiences that I had growing up, that is what the basis of my business is all about. And you're going to get to see that firsthand here. So growing up, I grew up with a single mom. Any single parents in the room? Maybe a few. I would argue that being a single parent is probably one of the most difficult jobs in the world. But my dad left when I was young. I was in 3rd grade. And when he left, we really didn't have any food. He left us with no gas and no electricity. And my mom at that time just worked in the house, so she did not have an income, right? So we were in tough shape, And I'm sure some of you can relate with this. At that time, though, thankfully, we had a small business in town that showed up, came to our rescue, and brought us fruits and vegetables, right? Broccoli, cauliflower, all the things that kids love, right? But they would show up and they would bring us this produce, vegetables, fruit, and they really helped us during a difficult time. And early on, that's where I started to learn a lesson about small business and the power of small business, right? This small business reacted to our situation and they showed up for us. And this company, Sanfilippo Produce, is still in business today. And when I'm driving through the streets of Columbus, Ohio, and I see a Sanfilippo Produce vehicle, it really warms my heart, because they really, really came through for us at a difficult time. Now, it was at this time that my mom had to figure out what she was going to do for an income, right? And so she decided to go to college. She went to the Ohio State University. I know I've got at least one Buckeye, 2 Buckeyes, I think, in the room. There we go, OH. Yeah, there you go. But she went to Ohio State, and she decided to go to Ohio State and become a teacher. And she chose the profession of a teacher because it was similar to my brother and my schedule, right? If we were off in the summer, she was going to be off. Like, it aligned well with what was going on in our family at the time. And when she went to school, sometimes my brother and I had to go with her, okay? And in the middle of the campus at Ohio State, there's this big green space. It's called the Oval. Here's a picture of it. And the Oval is lined with buildings along the perimeter. This is a picture of the library. But there's the buildings, the classrooms are along the perimeter. And what my mom would do is she would take my brother and I, she would go set us up in the Oval, set us up in this little grassy area with our soccer ball, our football, our snacks. And then she would go up into class, up in the building, and she would sit by the window. And she would sit in that window and watch us while she was going to college. And I actually got to attend my mom's college graduation, and it's, a special memory that I really hold close to my heart these days. Now, my mom, I said she was going to school to be a teacher. She actually became an ESL teacher, which is English as a second language. So you might have heard of that. I think they call it different things nowadays. But her students were kids from all over the world. And when people come to this country, they often come in different waves. So she had Cambodian kids, Vietnamese kids. She had kids from Ukraine, of course, El Salvador, Honduras, Mexico. And those were her students, and she was tasked with teaching them English. Well, the cool thing about my mom is that she was an exceptional teacher, and she really got involved with these families, okay? And it was really cool because I got to experience some super cool things because she was an ESL teacher. So, for example, her Cambodian kids and their family would invite us to Buddhist temples. So when I was young, we'd be going to the Buddhist temple. I get to see the monks in their orange robes and their shaved heads, and I got to experience this and learn a little bit about Buddhism. Her Vietnamese students, their families would make my mom these beautiful Vietnamese dresses, and my mom's a little eccentric. She would wear them. She would wear them to school when she would teach. And so I got to experience these really, really cool experiences and get exposed to different cultures, different languages, and different people early on. And I want you to kind of remember this as I move forward and talk about what we're doing at No Dirt Painting, because this is another value that really stuck with me. The other thing that's very interesting when I look back on this, during this rather difficult time, My mom's going to school, cleaning houses and doing all those things. There's one thing she did that to me was pretty exceptional. She kept a really, really nice house for us. Now, we didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't have a lot of, let's just say, high quality things. But you know what we did do? We painted. We put up wallpaper. We took down wallpaper. If we wanted new curtains, new throw pillows, she was a master on the sewing machine. She would make this stuff. If we needed a new couch, she would actually take us to the thrift store. We'd buy sheets, and she would sew a new slipcover. Now, if you know anything about sewing, that is not an easy task, but that's what my mom did. But here's what she also did, is that she taught me how important space was, right? During this time, or relatively difficult time in life, she created a space for our family that I was proud of, right? I was proud to bring friends over. She created a space that was comfortable, that was safe. And ultimately, I think she created a space for me that really helped me lean into my creativity. I often give my mom credit for getting me into the painting industry because of all the painting that we did when we were younger. But this idea of space is an idea I want to invite you to partake in. We work in people's houses all the time, right? And I know firsthand the power of space. And the way we approach this in my business is that we actually are having a huge impact on people's lives, right? We are creating a space for people that they're proud of, a space that they feel safe in, a space that when they pull up to their house after a long day of work and they see a beautiful exterior paint job, they're proud of that, right? And you don't always know what's going on in people's lives, but I can tell you firsthand that space is powerful. And so when I think about what we're doing, I hold it in high regard because I know how important spaces are. And so I want to invite you to kind of carry that with you. It's not just about putting paint on the wall, it's about something else. Now, I've mentioned a couple times how much I love my business. It's my passion. And when I started this business, it was literally me and a paintbrush. And then it grew. Hired my first painter. And I'll tell you what, one of my first painters I found because his uncle was one of my mom's past students from El Salvador. She had a group of students that were all brothers, and they were painters. They had a hard time keeping work because there were some language barriers there. But one of my first best painters was William, who was the nephew of one of my mom's students. So I'm growing this business. I'm wearing all the hats, and I know that some of you can relate to this because it's already been talked about. I was the painter with the brush in my hand, and then I'd run to an estimate, and then I'd manage a project, and then I would drive all over town delivering materials, right? And I was literally losing my mind. Now, if you're really, really organized and creative, you wouldn't believe how many 5-gallon buckets of paint you can fit in a 2-door Honda Civic, because that's what I was driving around town in, right? And I was literally losing my mind. It was destroying me, okay? And when I talk about this, it actually really makes me sad because I know how much I love this business, but it was literally killing me. I was in contractor prison, as some people say. Now, I had friends that recognized this. They recognized what was happening to me, and they would say things to me like, Michael, you're going to be one of those hardworking, successful 40-year-olds that has a massive heart attack. Okay, this is the feedback that I was getting from the people close to me. And I'll tell you what, I've had chronic back pain for years, okay? It started in my lower back. And I've got some real things. I've got a degenerative disc disease, and what that means is, the padding in between your bones is like dissolving, and it's a real thing. It's really painful, and there's surgeries. There's some things you can do, but it's kind of something you have to adapt to in life. Well, this lower back pain at this time was getting so bad that it was going right up my spine. Okay. So far up my spine that it ended up in my shoulders, and I would have the worst pinched nerves. I would actually end up in the hospital, in the ER, because this pain was so great, and I could not find anything at all to take care of this pain. okay? This pain ended up going into the back of my neck, into the bottom of my skull. I'd wake up every day with like the worst sore neck. I couldn't turn my head side to side, up and down. You know, it's like the worst stiff neck you could ever imagine. And I'm like, geez, I've tried every pillow, I've tried every mattress. This was my life. And if anybody suffers with chronic pain at all, you know that chronic pain of any kind can lead to depression, inactivity, weight gain, right? Lots of unhealthy habits. And sure enough, that's exactly what was happening to me. And it resulted in me asking really a heartbreaking question to myself. This heartbreaking question was, do I even want this business anymore? Like, it's literally killing me. That's what I felt like. It's what my back was telling me. It's pretty much what my friends and family were telling me. And so I'm faced with this heartbreaking question. But look, I'm a former college athlete, okay? I have a high pain tolerance. I'm competitive. I didn't want to give up, but at the same time, I knew I could not keep going like this. I knew it was impossible for me to have a successful business that made money. It was impossible for me to just live my life like this, right? So what I did was I hired a coach, okay? Now, I've had many different coaches over the years. I've had coaches that have focused on numbers. I'd have trainers that have focused on fitness, right? I've had different types of coaches, but I specifically hired this coach. She calls herself a transformational business coach, okay? And really, honestly, it's kind of a fancy word for like some deep, deep therapy work, okay? But I hired her specifically to help me answer this question. And as we're going deep, and I'm talking about deep, deep, like back to childhood deep, and understanding why I'm showing up in the world the way I am, and understanding why I can't keep promises to myself, and why it's so difficult for me to take care of myself, those are the things that she was helping me explore. And it was giving me some direction. You know, we were trying to figure out what was on my heart. What do I want my life to look like? And what I discovered was, you know what? That's not an easy question. What do you want for your life? I realized it wasn't an easy question because I couldn't answer it. And I also, from talking to people, realized that most people can't answer that question, okay? And so doing this deep dive really helped me lean into who I want to be in this world, how I want to show up, and ultimately what I want for my business. And what this resulted in eventually was this list that I call my life list. Now, I also call it an F-it list, but I just didn't feel like I could put the F word up here on this slide. So we're going with life list. But this life list was generated by an experience I had going snorkeling. Now, this is so silly, okay? But as good of an athlete as I was, and by the way, I still hold the best three-point percentage at the college that I went to. That record is still intact. But I've never been a good swimmer. It's just one of those things I did not get a lot of experience in. When I grew up, I had terrible ear infections, so I would stay out of the water because every time I went swimming, I would get this ear infection. So I'm in Mexico. I'm going snorkeling for the first time, you know, because when you go to Mexico, you're supposed to do all those things. So I'm like, okay, I'll go snorkeling. I get in the water. It's really choppy. And I start to have a panic attack. Now, I've never had panic attacks. I'm not really prone to them. But I had my first panic attack in the waters off the shore of Tulum, Mexico. Okay? Now, one thing I learned in childhood was that I learned how to hide my feelings. Now, I still have some work to do on that, but I'm having this panic attack, but nobody around me really knows it because I'm so good at hiding my feelings. And I just could not understand why people were in this water with a GoPro looking for turtles, and they think it's fun, and I'm over here literally having the story run through my mind that I'm going to die. That's what I was doing while I was snorkeling. So finally, I'm like, I'm done. I'm getting out of the water. I'm getting back in the boat. Now, after I got back in that boat, of course, I start beating myself up because, another thing that I've done in life when I don't keep a promise to myself, I then start to beat myself up, right? It's this cycle. And I started to do that. Now, this is after I've been working with my coach, and this is after I had learned some tools and learned how to self-reflect and catch that negative talk. But I started doing it, and I kind of had this conversation with myself, and I was like, you know what? I don't ever want to feel like this again. That feeling of being out of control in the water, that panicked feeling, this message that I'm telling myself, the story that I'm telling myself, I have got to learn how to control that because I've actually been doing this all my life, okay? So as I, move past my snorkeling, first and only snorkeling experience, I decide that I've got to recreate that exact feeling for me. I've got to recreate that exact moment, and I've got to get through it. So this was the beginning of my life list. And the first thing that I put on my life list was that I wanted to get certified as a scuba diver. Are there any divers in the room? Any master divers? Okay, cool. We've got some divers with us. So my plan of attack was I'm going to go get certified in scuba diving. Keep in mind, I really can't swim still to this day. But this was my way to put myself back in this situation and give myself practice on getting through a difficult situation. And I did exactly that. I got certified to be a scuba diver. Now, I will also tell you that through this process, it was a slow, long process. Now, my instructors were really kind, and they said, hey, this is normal. It's normal for people to struggle. And I don't know if they were just being nice or not, but you know what would happen? Even when I was doing my training in the pool, a 5-foot pool, I'd go sit on the bottom of that pool, and I'd be trying to breathe. And the moment I did that, I would start renegotiating with myself what I already told myself I was going to do. So I told myself I'm going to get certified. And the moment I get down there and the moment it got difficult, I would renegotiate and I would come up and I would get out of there. And this was a series of events that kept happening while I was going through my training. Now, I finally got through the training, and I ended up getting certified in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, and I spent a lot of time in Playa del Carmen because I have an amazing scuba instructor there. And we've worked together. He's helped me get to the point where I can go diving, and I'm experiencing this amazing world that not a lot of people get to see. I mean, it's amazing, and I'm so excited about, finally doing this. And I was about 3 or 4 dives in, and we go on a drift dive, and I'm down on the ocean floor about 60 feet below, and guess what happens? I have a full-blown panic attack on the bottom of the ocean floor. Now, the divers in the room know this, but when you're down there, you can't just come up, okay? You could die. You're in open water. There's boats going back and forth, right? You can't just come up and get out of the water. As a matter of fact, I tried, and my instructor pulled me right back down. You also, when you ascend, you have to make a safety stop at about 15 feet. And that safety stop helps get, the nitrogen out of your lungs. And your safety stop, the amount of time that it takes to do your safety stop, it depends on how deep you were and how long you were in the water. So you can't just come up. So what I had to do for the next 10 to 15 minutes is I had to change the story I was telling myself. Now, I want to tell you something about diving. It's a mental sport. When you go diving, you have to breathe all the way in and all the way out at a very, very slow pace, okay? Very slow pace. It's completely mental. So as I was down there having my panic attack, when you're diving, you have hand signals, and the hand signal for breathing is this. And so my instructor sat on the bottom of the ocean floor, holding my hand, helping me breathe. And this was another rep that I was getting at changing the story in my head. Right? This was me flexing that muscle once again, getting more practice. It's staying in the moment, okay? And now, scuba diving is one of my other passions in life. And I go diving in Cozumel, which is one of the best places to dive in the world. But this experience of snorkeling and diving, it forced me to add more things to my life list. So the thought process here for me is, look, I need to have more moments where I challenge myself, and then I renegotiate with myself. And here's what I mean. We've probably all done it, right? We've made promises to ourselves. I'm gonna go to the gym in the morning. That alarm clock goes off. My habit was to renegotiate my agreement I previously made. And then guess what would happen? I wouldn't go to the gym. And so this life list, what this has become for me is this is my challenge to myself. I'm gonna get as many reps as I can in situations that I want to renegotiate with myself, but I'm gonna pull through. And so, the big thing on Instagram right now are like ice baths, right? So I'm seeing all these ice baths. I'm like, I gotta do an ice bath. All the successful people do it. Let me partake in this. So I ordered my portable ice bath. I put it out on my porch. I put water in there. And my agreement to myself was the next morning I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna get in this ice bath for 3 minutes, right? Everyone says to start out doing 3 minutes. So I'm like, I'm gonna do 3 minutes. So I get out there, I'm ready, I get in this ice bath, and guess what happens the moment I get in there? Start renegotiating that agreement. And I'm like, why are you doing this? This is so stupid. You're out here at 5 a.m. by yourself. And I couldn't make it 3 minutes. I made it 20 seconds. And then guess what else I did? I beat myself up throughout the rest of the day because I could not keep that promise to myself. So that told me this needs to go on my life list. So what I did, I put on my life list that I'm gonna do 60 days in a row of an ice bath at 5 a.m. in the morning, in the middle of winter, in Ohio. Every morning I was out there with a hammer cracking open this ice because that's how cold it is in Ohio in the winter. But guess what? I started flexing that muscle. I got in that ice bath every morning at 5 a.m. by myself. I did it for 60 days straight. And you know what happens when you start keeping promises to yourself? You become a different person. You show up differently in life. You set bigger goals. You achieve them. You even have more money in the bank, right? And so this idea, here I am actually dive in Cozumel, but this idea of these challenges has been my way to move the needle. It has been my way to push me to this edge, right? So that I can ultimately move through this world in the way that I think I'm supposed to be. I'm learning how to flex those muscles so that I can stand in my own light and allow the world to reap the benefits of the gifts that I have. And here's the thing, I believe we all have them. We all have these unique gifts, and I think sometimes they get pushed down and they get hidden because we aren't taking care of ourselves. Now, to the fun part, I get to talk about my business. The one reason I'm so proud of our business is because we're doing some really cool things for people. And I will tell you that we would not have been set up to do those things if I didn't take a deep dive into who I am, right? Your business is only a reflection of you. We talked about values and those questions came up. Your business's values are your values, right? So we've kind of coined this phrase, changing lives through paint. And when I think of my business and No Drip Paint, the amazing things we're doing, the real purpose is how can we use the brush to impact people? And we have found ways to do that. And one way we have done that over the years is we have offered English classes. We have taught English classes to our team. We teach English classes to our subs, to our employees. We have a split model. We have employees and we have subcontractors. We've opened up these classes to their families. And this is one way we can support our team, right? I believe that if you're gonna be successful in this country, you do have to learn English. It's going to give you more options. And if you're bilingual, I think you're a powerhouse. And so this is one thing that we were doing. I'll tell you what, to make this thing come full circle, I told you how my mom was an ESL teacher. She actually was our first teacher. She's retired now, but she came back and on occasion, she teaches some of our English classes. The next thing I want to talk about is our Paint It Forward program because we've put a spin on it. Now, I know that there are some people here who this is their first PCA event, and you might not even know what Paint It Forward means. So I'll give you a little bit of a look into that. So Paying it forward is when we use this craft that we love, we respect, this valuable skill set that we have. It's when we use this to do good for others, right? Maybe it's a nonprofit, maybe it's a family that needs their house spruced up, maybe it's someone like me when I was young that really needed a good space to lean into, right? But the cool thing about our Paying It Forward program is that we get to tailor it and align it with our values. And what that means is we get to work with nonprofits who align with who we are. And who we are is we are a company that is inclusive. We don't exclude people. We don't exclude people that aren't from here, that speak a different language. We welcome people. And so we get to work with nonprofits that do that same thing. And one of the things I put on my life list was, you know what? I want us to do 12 Paying It Forward projects. And sure enough, last year we did 12 Paying It Forward projects under our Paying It Forward program. And I'll tell you what, when I talk about we get to work with folks that align with our values, half of my team grew up with a single mom. So of course, when we do a Paying It Forward project, we're gonna look for a single mom, right? On my team, I've got a military member. Katie, one of my project managers, is in the reserves. Every month, she takes off to serve our country, and then every year she takes off for a couple weeks. And so, of course, we're going to make sure that we do a project for a military family every year. Projects for widows, whatever the case may be, we get to decide who that is, and it's super, super powerful. Now, I want to introduce you to another idea. I always like when people give me book recommendations. This is a really cool book. Now, this book is based on the restaurant industry, okay? But this book talks about how you can create these exceptional experiences for your guests, right? And it really gave us a lot of great ideas and insight into how we can create an experience for our customers. But the other thing it did was it gave me some insight on how we can treat our team. Right? The things in this book really aligned with me, and it gave me some ideas. So some of the things that we do that are kind of unique that I'd like to share with you is that we do unlimited vacation for our salaried folks, okay? And one of the reasons I wanted to do that is because I never wanted someone to say something like, I have the opportunity to, go backpacking through Europe, but I've only got 3 days of vacation left, right? I didn't want that to be a reason that someone couldn't partake in something. The other thing that we do, of course, is we pay people what they deserve. Too often in our industry, people are taken advantage of. And here's what this looks like for us. Even when we bring on subcontractors, we ask them, what do you pay your people? If they aren't paying their people a reasonable wage, then they can't work with us. They just can't. We draw the line there. We, of course, pay our employees a competitive wage. And the story I will tell you about this is that back in the day when I was in that contractor prison, this idea of unreasonable hospitality was still on my heart in some capacity because William, who I had mentioned, who worked for me, my best painter, who's with me for about 5 years before he started his own business, his family was from El Salvador. And there were times that, look, I couldn't pay myself. Right? I would pay William and not pay myself. And I just know that we've all experienced this. But through paying William, you know what he was able to do? He was able to build a house in El Salvador for his mother. His mom at the time lived in really a shack with no running water, no electricity. And because I had this idea of, unreasonable hospitality or really just treating people right and paying people what they deserve, he was able to build this house for her with running water and electricity in an area that was virtually unheard of, right? And so what he was able to do was literally change the trajectory of his family's life with this house. Now, I can't get up here on a stage and not talk about women in the industry, right? And I want to let you know that in this room right now, there are some badass women, okay? I'm telling you, there are. There are, and I see another one back there. But let's talk about this. Women in the industry, right? Women are here. This is a space for women to thrive. And what I employ you to do is to recognize that we've got to all create a safe space for women, okay? And I'm gonna give you some firsthand examples of what I mean by this. So there's lots of Facebook groups out there, and if we're honest, Some of them aren't very friendly, right? You can't even ask how you price something out without people telling you you're an idiot, right? Well, in this particular case, this woman asked a very honest question. And what she's asking here is, where do I get painter's pants? It's a common thing for women, right? The painter's pants that are being made do not fit us. They just don't. So if there's any of the big brands in here, this is your invitation to make some pants for women. But I want to show you what this type of question solicits on a painting contractor's Facebook page. Now listen, I didn't hide any names, I figure I'm up here, I'm being vulnerable, I've talked about my social anxiety. If this is you, or if you know this person, this is also their invitation to do better, and this is your invitation to make sure that you're not supporting these comments. Now, I'm not going to read them all, but you can get the idea of what the suggestion is. These are the suggestions of what kind of pants you can wear. The last one here I'll read. It says, I thought the ladies liked wearing tennis skirts to help us guys work harder. LOL. It's not funny. There are women in this industry that work hard just like you do every day. And this is something to pay attention to. Now, the question is, how do we get women involved, right? Well, change the conversation around the construction industry and the painting industry. In my business, 75% of us are female, and we're killing it. We've got a successful, profitable business in Columbus, Ohio. And so change the discussion. Are you telling your nieces, hey, the painting industry is a viable career path? Are you telling your sister, right? Are you telling the women in your life that this is a viable career path? Are you trying to hire women? It's interesting. When we put our marketing ads out there for women or for painters, we will often put a picture of a woman because I think you got to see, you got to see familiar faces. You got to see people that look like you in order to be interested. And it never fails. We still have people calling our office throughout the year saying things like, are you hiring women? And I'm a female-owned business, and they're calling my business asking that. Also, become a mentor. We've got women in here who are really killing it at what they're doing. Consider becoming a mentor. And fellas, if you are a mentor, make sure you're bringing women into that fold. Now, the question is, why does it matter? One of the big reasons is because we all know that there's a shortage of workers, right? In the construction industry, in our industry. And I believe that if we focused on women a little bit more and let women know that, hey, this is a viable career path. You can be a project manager, you can be an estimator, you can be a painter, you can be a business owner, right? If we give that message, that alone could potentially curb the shortage that we're experiencing. And then the other reason it matters is because there are already women in the industry. And those comments that you see on Facebook, it's not funny, right? And I really just want to make that point. Now, I also have the stage for a few moments, so I got to give a little plug to the Women in Paint podcast. We are looking for guests, and there's women in here that should be on that podcast. And also, fellas, you can also be a guest, but you can also tune in and listen and support. We're going to be doing our breakout here soon. But really, what I want to kind of end here on is a couple things. One, we have a choice on how we look at what we're doing. We can look at what we're doing and say, we're just painting walls, right? Or we can look at what we're doing and really respect what we're doing, and we can recognize that we're actually having a huge impact on someone's life, right? Because when they want to share their space with their friends and family, when they pull up to their house after a long day at work and they're proud of what they have, that's a special feeling. And that's what we get to create. The other thing, to bring this back to the habits and consistency, what I would, invite you to do is think about the idea, are you keeping promises to yourself? And remember that your business, your position, whatever it is you're doing for your career path is an absolute reflection of how you're showing up into the world. Are you showing up, keeping promises? Are you showing up so that you are setting yourself up to lean into all of the natural gifts that you have? And last but not least, how can you make an impact? in your business? How can you make an impact, in the lives of others? And we've done that through our mission of changing lives through paint. Thank you.